know I said I was going to upload more frequently. Please don't come for me. But I have a job outside of YouTube at the moment, okay? Plus, I had already scripted and recorded another video, but it was going to be like 5 minutes long, and I lost my passion for it, so... Aww. Yeah! Now we're here! That being said, happy Women's History Month. What better time to talk about queer women's stories?
Women's stories matter.
Yeah.
Right. They just matter.
That being said, hi, this is a ranking video where I'm going to be ranking 5 queer books about women. I'm going to be introducing the books by my personal ranking, which depends on character development, likability, relatability, and overall storytelling. I'm going to include some samples from the book too, which I either really loved or really hated and almost laughed at. Well, I didn't almost laugh at them, I did laugh at them because they were just awful. But whatever, that's neither here nor there. No offense to the authors though. Let's get started. Book number 1 is Delilah Green Doesn't Care. The synopsis is, Delilah Green swore she would never go back to Bright Falls. Nothing is there for her but memories of a lonely childhood where she was little more than a burden to her cold and distant stepfamily. Her life is in New York, with her photography career finally gaining steam and her bed never empty. Sure, it's a different woman every night, but that's just fine with her. When Delilah's estranged stepsister, Astrid, pressures her into photographing her wedding with a guilt trip and a 5-figure check, Delilah finds herself back in this godforsaken town that she used to call home. She plans to breeze in and out, but then she sees Claire Sutherland, one of Astrid's stuck-up besties, and decides that maybe there's some fun, and a little retribution, to be had in Bright Falls after all. Having raised her 11-year-old daughter mostly on her own while dealing with her unreliable ex and running a bookstore, Claire Sutherland depends upon a life without surprises, and Delilah Green is an unwelcome surprise, at first. Though they've known each other for years, they don't really know each other, so Claire is unsettled when Delilah figures out exactly what buttons to push. When they're forced together during a gauntlet of wedding preparations, including a plot to save Astrid from her horrible fiancé, Claire isn't sure she has the strength to resist Delilah's charms. Even worse, she's starting to think she doesn't want to.
Oh no, I hope I don't fall. No.
Here are my thoughts. For starters, Delilah is so hot. Not just based upon her physical description of having curly hair and tattoos, but the way she communicates with Claire is so flirty too. Like, she'll respond to Claire's confirmations with the same word in question form just so Claire can say it again because she's teasing her. And the chemistry between Delilah and Claire radiates off the page. There's instances where they're secretly showing affection around the other characters in the book that don't know they're together, and I like those playfulness aspects. It's almost like a crush no one is supposed to know you have in like middle school or something. And don't get me started on the NSFW scenes, because I honestly couldn't believe that what I was reading was coming from a later in life queer woman that's married to a man. Like, they weren't having sex, they were making love.
Next time we fuck, I don't wanna fuck, I wanna make love.
Anyway, and the way the author builds the tension between them leading up to the initial moment was absolutely insane. She used all the tropes where they were kind of forbidden lovers because Claire's friends with Delilah's sister who doesn't like Delilah, plus they had to share the same bed. I literally broke the spine of the book, and they didn't even have sex at that point. This was just the first time they kissed. Like, how I made it through the book, I honestly don't know.
But yeah, it'll be fun. It's going to be a very epic. I wanted to make, my one thing was I went into the Disney Channel building and I sat down with the president of Disney Channel and I said, I want to make history. And that's what this is.
Aside from that, there were parts of the book that displayed incredible character development, not just for the protagonists, but the secondary characters as well. You have to keep in mind this is a tale of reconciling relationships that were either damaged and abandoned or never existed in the first place due to the commitment of character opposition. A quote from the book I really loved was when Delilah is eavesdropping on a conversation between her stepmother and her sister regarding Delilah's hand in ruining her sister's engagement. "If you ask me, this is her fault," Isabel said. "You were perfectly happy marrying Spencer before she came back to town. I warned you she'd stir up trouble. But no, you just had to have your sister at your wedding, didn't you?" Delilah frowned, blinking at the door and trying to process what she'd just heard. Even after all these years, Isabel's indifference toward her still stung. She wished it didn't, told herself it didn't matter, but she couldn't help it. Some childish, desperate need for love always rose up inside her when it came to Isabel. She said she didn't care, but the truth was, Isabel was the only mother she'd ever known, and that woman hated her. Or worse, felt nothing toward her. Isabel didn't love Delilah Green, and she never would, and she hadn't wanted Delilah at Astrid's wedding. She hadn't hired her as the photographer, she hadn't guilted Delilah into coming, indicating her father would have wanted her there. She hadn't offered her a ridiculous amount of money she knew Delilah needed. Astrid had done all that. Astrid had wanted her here. My rating: were there still cheesy parts? Sure. But I don't remember them, so it doesn't count. 5 out of 5. Book number 2 is She Drives Me Crazy. The synopsis is: high school nemesis fall in love in Kelly Quindell's She Drives Me Crazy, a queer YA rom-com perfect for fans of Becky Alberati. I'm not reading that part. After an embarrassing loss to her ex-girlfriend in their first basketball game of the season, 17-year-old Scotty Zajac gets into a fender bender with the worst possible person, her nemesis, Irene Abraham, head cheerleader for the Fighting Reindeer. Irene is as mean as she is beautiful, so Scotty makes a point to keep her distance. When the accident sends Irene's car to the shop for weeks' worth of repairs and the girls are forced to carpool, their rocky start only gets bumpier. But when an opportunity arises for Scotty to get back at her toxic ex and climb her school's social ladder, she bribes Eileen into an elaborate fake dating scheme that threatens to reveal some very real feelings. My thoughts on this are that I love when a book has an oversaturation of tropes. And by oversaturation, I mean like more than one at a time, but whatever. But it's done in a goofy way. For example, this book is fake dating to real dating, rivals to lovers read, but the rivals to lovers part is done incorrectly, which makes it wholesome. And by that I mean they did the trope wrong because the girls weren't necessarily rivals. They just weren't friendly with each other because of a miscommunication, which is like obviously to be expected. They're teenagers. So who was mad? Not me. Usually when enemies to lovers is done correctly, it's always traumatic and people root for it, which I will never understand. Like, Irene didn't shove Scotty into a locker because she thought she was cute and didn't know how to express her feelings towards her. She just backed into her car instead. I mean, that's like the only rational thing to do. That being said, I loved how the characters truly grow into each other throughout the book, and they go from misunderstandings to brief friends to lovers, but at a lesbian pace, because I swear they only actually disliked each other for like a week, then they were flirting the next. I also really love how realistic the post-breakup scene was for Scotty and her whack-ass ex, because instead of her girl-bossing her feelings and acting unbothered by her apparent first breakup, the author allows her to fall into the old habit of going back to her ex, even though she was hurt by the breakup. And the sole purpose of her doing that is so she can learn the important lesson of like, going back to something that doesn't serve you is just going to hurt you in the long run, so don't fall for it. Fortunately, Scotty does get a backbone towards the third act of the book and prioritizes herself and the people that actually like her, which was beautiful to see. I also liked how the author wrote both the protagonists' backgrounds. Like, she wasn't afraid to give them background stories that weren't traumatic and or like devastating to their character development. They were simply two high school girls that had parents that were okay with them being gay. My favorite part from the book was the scene where one of their dates with Irene's friend, and they have some cute little banter about potentially liking each other. Irene blows out an irritated breath, but I can hear the self-consciousness beneath it. What else did she tell you? That's between us, Scotty. Fine. You really want to know? She said you talk about me all the time. Irene snorts. Oh, did she now? Are you talking about me? She narrows her eyes. What? You think I'm gossiping? I spend half my time with you now. You're obviously going to come up in conversation. She said you talk about my favorite songs. Irene laughs in the back of her throat. More like I complain that you play the same 5 songs over and over. I look over at her as we turn back onto the main road. So you're not, obsessed with you? She snorts and strains against her seat. No. Were you worried I was catching feelings? No, I say hastily. Okay. Good. Because I'm not. Good. Neither am I. We fall silent. I turn the music up. She turns it back down. You don't have to act like the idea is so horrible, though, she says. You sound like you've contracted bird flu. That's not what I meant, I said quickly. It's just, this is purely a business arrangement. I'm well aware, Zajac. She crosses her arms over her chest. I wouldn't want to date you anyway. You love drama too much. My rating is a 4.5 out of 5 because it was super sweet, and I would have loved to have read this when I was in high school because it's the perfect amount of angst that doesn't cause you to throw the book at the wall and give up on literature altogether. Book number 3, and this is a reminder that we are at the halfway mark-ish, right? 2.5 is half of 5, so we're kind of over the halfway mark. Whatever. Who cares? Basically, the entire list is going to get worse from here. Again, sorry to the authors for putting the time in to make these books that I just did not like. Oh well. The synopsis of this is, Alex Blackwood is a little bit headstrong, with a dash of chaos and a whole lot of flirt. She knows how to get the girl. Keeping her, on the other hand, not so much. Molly Parker has everything in her life totally in control, except for her complete awkwardness with just about anyone besides her mom. She knows she's in love with the impossibly cool Cora Myers. She just hasn't actually talked to her yet. Alex and Molly don't belong on the same planet, let alone the same college campus. But when Alex, fresh off a bad, but hopefully not permanent, breakup, discovers Molly's hidden crush as their paths cross the night before classes start, they realize they might have a common interest after all. Because maybe if Alex volunteers to help Molly learn how to get her dream girl to fall to her, she can prove to her ex that she's not a selfish flirt, that she's ready for an actual commitment. And while Alex is the last person Molly would ever think she could trust, she can't deny Alex knows what she's doing with girls, unlike her. As the two embark on their 5-step plan to get their girls to fall for them, though, they both begin to wonder if maybe they're the ones falling for each other.
Whatever that means.
Alright, so here are my thoughts. The entire reason I dislike this book, and it might seem like a hot take, and maybe I just didn't get what the book was trying to do, but it must be said. I couldn't imagine someone not being physically attracted to me, but we end up together anyway. Call me shallow, but if I'm not initially physically attracted to you, or I don't even think about being attracted to you, I'm not going to try to pursue you romantically just because I found out you're a decent person. I will wait. I do not care. The characters in this book lacked overall chemistry, and the book reminds me of You Belong With Me by Taylor Swift, where the obvious love interest is overlooked for the more charismatic and generally attractive girl. Granted, there's no way Molly could have known that Alex was the one she should have been focusing on. I just personally found it weird that they orchestrated all of Molly's interactions with Cora in order to get her and Molly together. And that's not even the worst part. Cora admittedly likes Alex, and only moves to Molly after the protagonists enact their plan to get her to fall in love with Molly.
It's getting weird.
It was just desperate for all parties involved. Although I read it expecting not to relate to all of the characters' identities, the storytelling aspect just wasn't there for me because it just felt like they threw in Molly's identity crisis having mom and Alex's alcoholic mom into the mix, just to make things interesting, when it was just traumatizing because you're not expecting it from a book about young love. Not saying these experiences aren't real for some people. I'm just burnt out on trauma, to be honest. I did like that the authors are lovers in real life, though. The part I'm going to read focuses on Molly realizing she doesn't like Cora at all, but the idea of her, which was also real. The only relatable part of the book, in my opinion. I look over at my mom and I can practically see her eyes glazing over as Cora speaks. I try to switch topics and tell my mom that we're in biology together, but Cora sort of plows over me with more details of her book. I never realized how much she likes to talk. I was so glad for it at the party. She would fill the silence when I was too nervous to say anything, so I just never really noticed. But now that I want to, I can't get a word in. I feel a layer of sweat coat the back of my neck as I watch the scene drag on in front of me. My mom has clearly checked out of the conversation, even though she's still trying to be polite by offering an "oh" and "uh-huh" every now and again. She hates her. My mom hates her. God, this was such a terrible idea. I thought she'd like her as much as I did. As much as I do. My rating for the book is... The writing was easy to follow, and I liked the alternating perspectives, but it wasn't anything new for what I was reading at the time, and the book was meh. I bought the book, so maybe I'm the problem. I don't know. 2 out of 5. Book number 4. My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness. I know. Everyone recommends this book to new gays, and I'm breaking the cycle. Okay? I refuse. Maybe this is generational trauma, but I'm going to harshly break the cycle and just tell you guys that this book is not worth the money, the time, the energy. It's not worth it. Honestly, no. No. Anyway, here's the synopsis. My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness is an honest and heartfelt look at one young woman's exploration of her sexuality, mental well-being, and growing up in our modern age, told using expressive artwork that invokes both laughter and tears. This moving and highly entertaining single volume depicts not only the artist's burgeoning sexuality, but many other personal aspects of her life that will resonate with readers. My thoughts are, I didn't like it, but I like the representation aspect of it though, because the author has social anxiety and is trying to cope with it through her sexuality. I just couldn't relate to it because the way she expresses her lesbianism isn't how I express mine, which sounds tricky, but her attraction to women wasn't typically mentioned or described as physical attraction, but more the lack of actually doing something with that attraction. For example, instead of her taking the time to surround herself with female partnerships organically, she goes out of her way to hire a female sex worker to spend time with her in a non-sexual way. Not saying she's not allowed to do that because it's her money and her sexual journey. I just didn't relate to it. And I'm impulsive and jump to conclusions a lot. So, aside from that, it was just very boring to me. But if I were dealing with social anxiety at the time of reading this book, I probably would have liked it more given it had very realistic depictions of mental health and displays the way the author momentarily copes with her illness. The quote I'm reading is actually a part from the book that I found funny. Literally when I went back to read parts of the book to put into this video. That is so sad that whatever. This is when the 28-year-old author is trying to find the perfect woman to take her virginity at the Love Hotel. So she's using an app to reserve a girl for that. I can just start by looking up the prices, right? And info on how to use the agency. Who's there? Then I'll think harder about this. Huh? Everyone's so young. They're so pretty and so young. Wow. There's someone older than me. I want an older girl to spoil me. My rating... This is the first and last time I take a recommendation from Reddit. 1 out of 5, because the color scheme of the book is pink. My final ranking of the evening, the day, the year. My final ranking for Women's History Month is book number 5, which also has a bit of notoriety due to the content the book includes and the backlash the author faced because of it. If you are an avid reader of queer fiction, or you are like into books, like your Goodreads has like at least 5 books just from this month, you probably already know what book I'm talking about. Or if your favorite hobby to do on a Friday, Saturday night is frequent a Barnes & Noble, you probably already know what book I'm going to be talking about. That's right, book number 5 is One Last Stop. I'm just going to jump into the synopsis before I give any opinion. For cynical 23-year-old August, moving to New York City is supposed to prove her right that things like magic and cinematic love stories don't exist, and the only smart way to go through life is alone.
Okay.
She can't imagine how waiting tables at a 24-hour pancake diner and moving in with too many weird roommates could possibly change that. And there's certainly no chance of her subway commute being anything more than a daily trudge through boredom and electrical failures. But then, there's this gorgeous girl on the train. Jane. Dazzling, charming, mysterious, impossible Jane. Jane with her rough edges and swoopy hair and soft smile, showing up in a leather jacket to save August's day when she needs it most. August's subway crush becomes the best part of her day, but pretty soon she discovers there's one big problem. Jane doesn't just look like an old-school punk rocker. She's literally displaced in time from the 1970s.
Men, don't focus on the future, focus on the present.
And August is going to have to use everything she tried to leave in her own past to help her. Maybe it's time to start believing in some things, after all. Okay, so my thoughts. I just want to make the disclaimer that I didn't even finish this book because once I realized the main character's love interest is a ghost, I mentally tapped out. Like I couldn't push through. I'm sorry. I try to read queer books, especially ones about women, and I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. That's what I did with She Gets the Girl, but I couldn't. Granted, this book was a gift for Christmas, and I never actually read the back of the book before starting, so that's my bad on not knowing Jane was a ghost. Anyway, to me, it's a book that focuses on the I can save her, I can change her aspect.
You are so corny.
I have like a really incredible savior complex, and I just need to save everyone around me because I'm so put together and everyone else is broken. Like, that's the vibe that it gives, even when she's describing her roommates in the first half, and she's like, oh, these people are just weird New Yorkers. Wow, crazy. I was like, okay. Cool. I do also feel like the author wrote the most stereotypically gay people that came to mind. Like, imagine a gay person. The first 3 things you imagine, those were August's roommates. Period, point blank. I was just like, okay, cool, fine, cool. But anyway, to me, it's a book that focuses on the I can save her, or I can fix her, I can change her aspect. But the writing was muddied for me, which resulted in me skipping past the parts establishing the friend group or the outside activities because the book couldn't sustain me. Why were there entire chapters dedicated to August's exchange with her roommates? Or like her emotions towards her mom, or her job that added nothing to the plot outside of her finding out that Jane worked there? Like, I don't know, I just felt like I didn't need to hear about August's shifts at work. I didn't care. Like, at the time I was unemployed anyway. I was like, why am I reading about someone with a job? That's kind of weird. Like, Job Simulator, I don't care. Like, I really don't. It honestly felt like the author was trying to hit word count every time she reintroduced the background characters when she could have used that space to write actual dialogue for Jane and August. Like, she wasn't selling me on their chemistry. I was like, they don't really talk. They just look at each other, say hi, and then that's it, you know? But whatever. Overall, I just didn't care about the main character who was, like, running away from her true crime obsessed mom. It was a cool concept and all, but I read a fanfic similar to this and better written in high school, so. The part of the book that I'm going to read is when August thought Jane was going to want to hang out with her outside of the train after it was delayed for hours or something. I don't know. I just started giggling at that part because you don't normally see rejection like this. Like, it was insane. But anyway, August is opening her mouth to say something when the fluorescent lights come back on. The train shudders back into tentative motion to a round of cheers, and Jane sways with it away from August. She looks flushed and thoroughly pleased with herself. August checks her phone. Nearly noon. Classes are a bust. The seedy little bar where Nico works is squirreled away a few blocks from here. It should be opening soon. She looks at Jane, a step away but still close. And she thinks about the way Jane's hands trailed through her hair, her gasp of laughter in August's ear. Just because Jane didn't come to Billy's doesn't mean it's hopeless. I don't know about you, August says, but I could use a drink. There's a pretty cool dive bar right by my stop, if you're not doing anything. And Jane stares at her, like she's trying to work out if August really asked what she thinks she did. Oh, she says finally. August can hear the wince in her tone before she even sets the next part. I don't think I can. Oh, I mean, that sounds nice, but I can't. Because she's a ghost!
Oh, that's stupid!
She's a ghost. That's why she can't. But it was nice to believe that August thought that Jane genuinely did not fuck with her. She's like, I'm actually repulsive. I'm not like other girls act doesn't impress other girls. Oh my god! You know, a little context, this was also like a couple of days after Jane didn't show up to meet August at her job, and August was spending days looking for her. She was like, oh, if I go on the train, what if I see Jane? Oh my gosh, like, I'm bound to see her. It was really weird, but whatever. My rating for this book is like, white woman has sex on train in New York with a ghost after telling her racism doesn't exist anymore. 0 out of 5. My honorable mention on my shit list is the love song of Ivy K. Harlow.
Loser!
I honestly don't know why so many people like this book, but I feel like the writer intentionally made the main character a loser, where the only refutable quality about her is being gay. What do you mean you've been beefing with the 17-year-old at your grown age because she's in a relationship with your friend who you've been in love with? The same friend who intentionally doesn't talk about her relationships or her actual like romantic feelings towards anyone with you because she knows that you like her. And she doesn't like you. Like, no. It's just sad. Like, fucking loser. Anyway, just because two queer girls are friends doesn't mean they have to be in love with each other. Okay? Okay. What I'm reading now, The Romance Recipe. My thoughts. I'm tired of reading romance stories involving men.
Anytime you deal with the same sex, no matter on what level, it makes you gay. Isn't that such a thing as bisexual?
I skip all of Sophie's parts when she's interacting with her ex-boyfriend because I can't get over my disgust of men. I'm sorry. Alright, that's it. Bye!